So anyway,
Yep.
he was a good cat. But it's great to meet you. I'd love to begin our conversation. You have such an
Sure.
interesting lineage in your life. I'm so glad it started in a music shop.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
it's my background is or let's say my path has been very different.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, it has. So I want to begin this conversation before we get to the nuts and bolts of
Hmm.
4 years ago. This pandemic was raging. We didn't know where we were going to end up. How did you get through the pandemic era, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
Well, we're doing it right now. And that is I really became, well, let's say Zoom was my lifeline.
Yeah.
It was how I met. I'm in Toastmasters to keep my skills up, and so I belong to several clubs, and I try my material out in those various clubs. And so Zoom was the only way that we could do it. Uh, and then my partner and I, Doug Bowers, we started a podcast a few years ago because we wanted to get our message about business, particularly small business, out into the world. And I'm sure you have found it's amazing how people that you would never think would talk to you, they're happy to talk to you on a podcast.
Yeah.
And so we have had fabulous guests on there. I mean, real top flight people. And that's been a lot of fun.
It is amazing. I find podcasting to be a modern version of therapy. I think we're much more united than the media would make us believe. There's all this, there's this whole divided country thing, but everybody I talk to, we're all going towards the same things. We're all
Yeah,
trying to make our lives better for ourselves and our children and those around us. And it just really is a good platform. It really brings out the vibrance of our lives in such a civil way, and it's so nice and refreshing.
absolutely. Because the divisions in the country that you're talking about, they tend to exist on Facebook,
Yeah.
TikTok, Twitter,
Yeah.
X. That's where it exists. On Zoom, you can't get away with that because
Right.
you're looking the person in the face. And as we know, communications, words are a small part of communication.
Yeah.
It a lot of it is facial, a lot of it is tone inflection. So the written word is very divisive,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I guess it's one of the reasons why throughout history the written word has been monitored very closely.
Yeah, certainly.
So Zoom now you get the whole package
Uh-huh.
and you get all the communication elements, which I think is fabulous.
I do too. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do here in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders. It's
Hmm.
career day. And one of the curious kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer him?
Okay. What we do is we help any group. We focus on small business, but any group, we help them achieve friction-free communication. That's our first step, is we get them talking to each other in a way that they understand each other. And that's where our concept of the oval table comes from. And in fact, we use as our, shall we say, our example, we have seven personalities. And it doesn't have to be business, it can be something else. We have seven different personalities that we've identified, and they're sitting around the table. And each one of those people has to be able to talk to the others in language they understand, which address their concerns.
Yeah.
And everyone has to be able to understand each other. And that's the first step that we do with a group. We find that that immediately solves a lot of problems within the organization. If very often the front office doesn't know that that guy on the loading dock has some solutions to some pretty big problems, and they don't know that because they don't talk to him.
Yeah.
And so that's what we try to do at first. Well, then once you have a nice smooth running oval table, then what do you do with it? And that's where we get into red team thinking, which perhaps a red team thinking is a is a name that the United States Army came up with. Bryce Hoffman is a gentleman who, in his book, has made it known to the world and spread it around. But it's actually a very old concept. Just people, it hadn't been formulated yet. And really, it's just critical thinking. It's
Yeah.
critical thinking, asking the right questions, digging down. And if everybody's communicating and not threatened, it's amazing what you can achieve.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you were in the third grade, what did you want to be? What was your dream?
Okay, in 1962, I walked into a movie theater that my mother dropped me in front of. And of course, movie theaters back in those days were palaces,
Yeah.
red carpet and red upholstery and all that. And I sat down. It was a matinee. I was one of the only people in there. And I sat down, and it was Lawrence of Arabia. I came out of there with my life path set that I wanted to do that. In fact, I told my mother that. She said, how was the movie? I said, I want to do that. And she said, what, go to Arabia? I said, no, I want to take other people with me. I want to, you know, I probably didn't put it in these words, but I want to broaden their horizons the way
Yeah.
mine just got broadened. And I was interested in theater from that day forward. And that has taken me on a very interesting path. And that's why when I talk about business, I talk a lot about creativity and how you find creativity. We have 7 critical elements that we think are necessary to any successful business. And one of the main ones is innovation. It's creativity. If you're standing still, you're probably dying.
Yeah.
And creativity is a large part of what I handle. Now, my partner, Douglas, is a CPA. He handles nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
I handle some of the other things, which actually, when I first began as a speaker, businesses frequently said, oh, team building, communication, that's soft skills. No, what do you got that I can make money with? And I'm delighted to see that they get it now. Business is really getting the fact that communication, creativity, things like that are actually extremely important, and they make you money.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, let me ask you this. So you spent 20 plus years, award-winning director. You've seen a lot of things. What was the
Yeah.
key to that longevity? That's a tough industry to be in. What was it that fueled you and kept you going for all that time?
Oh, simple. I loved it.
Yeah.
If I had to work till midnight, that's fine. In fact, I'm still kind of on that schedule,
Yeah.
on the theater schedule. But when I was at UCLA in the theater department, um, I took a flyer and auditioned for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in New York. It was my first time in New York. I went there, I auditioned, I got in, and the next 3 years I lived in London with the theater scene there, which in the 70s was tremendous. It was a real golden age. And I got to meet people, all the royalty of the English stage. And it's weird. You remember the law of attraction, right? Which
Yeah.
I thought was most of it was nonsense. But one thing was true, that if you're very excited about something, if you're very dedicated to it, you do attract people who are the same.
Yeah.
And how many times did I find myself in a theater sitting next to someone like, say, Burt Lancaster in Edinburgh, and being able to spend the evening talking with him. It's just Laurence Olivier. I mean, I could go through a whole list. Angela Lansbury, when I worked at the National Theatre in London, I helped open the theater, and Angela Lansbury was working there, and she was wonderful. She was just a great lady, and just a she had already had a great career and went on to have an even bigger career
Yeah.
later. But it's all the fascinating people that I met. I love the energy of the audience. I hate it when I let them down, but boy, when I deliver, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best thing in the world.
So who was a hero for you? Who was an inspiration for you in your career? It's been diversified and very
Yeah.
eclectic and award-winning. Who has been that for you?
Okay. Well, in the theater part, it's Peter O'Toole.
Yeah.
And my first day at the Royal Academy, I just after all the classes were done, I just walked around the building to try to get sort of a feel for the place. And there was this cabinet on the wall with doors, and I opened the doors, and it was everybody who had won the gold medal at the Royal Academy. Now we didn't have the internet then, so we didn't
Yeah.
know a lot about people's backgrounds. In that cabinet were the signatures of the royalty of British theater from the 50s going forward. And there I found Peter O'Toole. I had no idea he had gone to the Royal Academy. Right then and there, I knew I was home. I had done the right thing. Business, it was quite a bit different. It I was part of the PC revolution. That I was working at Warehouse Records, which was a West Coast record store and video rental. And the PCs came out and they threw one on my desk and said, "Make it talk." And I did. And they said, "This is fabulous. You're going to do it for the whole company," which was a daunting thing to do, and train the people to do it. Well, I had a great mentor in what was then the MIS department. Now it's information technology. And he was a great mentor getting me through all that. And then when I worked at Disney for the Disney store, um, a gentleman, and I had him. In fact, I've had both these gentlemen on the podcast, but a gentleman there that I worked for is just one of the best people who had put one of the best groups together that I had ever seen, and that's Bill McFarland. He is just a tremendous mentor. He knows how to. He's tough, but he creates groups that work beautifully together. And so for what I do now, I would say Bill is a huge inspiration to me, because
Yeah.
I kind of said I want to grow up to be like him.
So you've mentioned some heavy names and people that you've been around, but if you
Mhm.
could get one person right now, a dream person to be on your podcast, who would you love to sit and pick their brain about?
do 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 they have to be alive?
We can open the door to ghosts. Let's do it.
um, at first, I would say Peter O'Toole, but he actually was a difficult interview. He had a
Yeah.
brain that kind of went all over the place.
Uh-huh.
I think perhaps the person. Oh, I'll tell you who. The man who was the principal of the Royal Academy, which was Hugh Crutwell. Uh, he is responsible for so many of the people that you see today through his career, and with him, um, I would like to have Michael Eisner,
Yeah.
who was quite the businessman, and I think had a real vision for Disney. Now they've gone on to do other things since then, but from where they were to where he got them was a tremendous achievement. And this is a man that knew his audience, knew his customer, which is the another one of course of our uh, critical elements. You got to know who your customer is. It's not everybody.
Right.
It's not everybody.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just went to Disney World about a month ago,
Mhm.
And there's people out there that are fanatics that want to go back and they're in that timeshare and all of that. And it's just like you said, there's certain people that fit that mold. They are the Disney people. And then there's others that can go in and say, this is wonderful, and then go on with their lives, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Well, we always knew at the Disney store, and when I started with the Disney store, I think we had 165 stores, and 5 years later we had 600 and some odd global. Uh, and in fact, they sent me to England for a while to work with teams there because Bill said, "Well, Carl speaks the language. Send him." And so, but uh, we always knew that we had our audience was from about 3 years old till maybe 12. It may be a bit younger now, but in our day it was in the 90s. It was till about 12, and then we lose them, and then we get them back
Yeah.
when they have their children,
Yeah.
and we always knew that,
Yeah.
and so we knew who we were talking to.
Absolutely. That's interesting. So, what was the biggest period of growth in your career? What was there a project? Was there a year that just really stands out that you really
Mhm. Yeah,
found your voice?
yeah. There was in business. It was working with the Walt Disney company
Yeah.
in a corporation, growing it out globally. Where we got to where we were all over the world. That was interesting. I learned so darn much about business and putting teams together and making things work. And that's what I was good at. I mean, as I told you, Bill is one of my mentors and idols, I guess you'd say. And putting teams together for the rest of my career, that's what I did. Uh, I have a theater background. What the hell am I doing in information technology, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Well, what I'm doing is hiring people who are a lot smarter than me and putting them together that they work efficiently together, setting goals and greasing the rails so they're not bothered by anybody else.
So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Ooh, best advice I've ever gotten. Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Also, you know, I would say also, and I really learned this with Bill, was if you screw up, be the first to announce it. Don't let somebody else tell him that you screwed up.
Yeah.
Tell him first and tell him how it's not going to happen again. And I think in any sort of organizational structure, that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
Is always be the first in there. Oops, here's what we did wrong.
Yeah.
And you gain so much credibility when you do that, because then when you get stuff right, you they believe you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, of all of these things that you've accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Hmm. I'm proud of the theater company that I helped found, because my life really does have two sections, right? Theater and business. But I learned many of my business rules in the theater, so it does dovetail. The
Yeah.
theater company that I helped put together in Los Angeles, we were able to run that theater with, we didn't take donations. In the very beginning, we did because we had to. But after that, we ran totally off the box office. Our very first show, which I directed, was a major hit, and we were able to just run from that point on. Very difficult thing to do in that world. I'm very proud of that. And in business, uh, the people that I was always able to promote them out of my area and send them on a career path. I always hated to lose them, but uh, to watch them become uh, great professionals and great leaders I that always just made me really happy. One of my people always won the cast member of the year at Disney, and that was a proud achievement. I love that.
So, if you had a dream tonight, you ran into the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give
Uh,
that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the
yes,
wisdom you've gained, what
yes.
advice would you impart? And would that version of you listen?
The advice I would give is arrogance is dangerous and very self-destructive. And when you're around people like I was around at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, shut up, listen. Even if it seems bizarre, do it. You never know. You may find out that this is something special. They think it is. And just as an example, I hated um, improvisation. I just hated it. Guess what I do now in business workshops? I use improvisation. I find it incredibly useful.
Yeah,
So, just like when I was in high school, I hated algebra.
yeah,
Guess what I made a living doing in business? Using algebra.
yeah. So let me ask you this: if you could get into a time machine and go back in time, whether in Disney lore or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, in entertainment or even overall, and see one thing with your own eyes, what would you love to have seen?
To have seen. Ooh, that's a good one. Hmm. Oh, there's so many. There are so many Broadway shows I wish I had seen that were before my time. Um, oh, I know.
Yeah,
I would love to have seen the original production of West Side Story.
yeah,
I think the original film, is absolutely a monument in American cultural history. The latest one, but
yeah,
but um, that I think it changed everything.
yeah,
I think it changed how movies were made, what topics were tackled. Be, uh, it changed Broadway. It changed musicals. We weren't doing Oklahoma anymore. We were doing things that spoke to our times.
yeah,
And Cabaret, the film Cabaret, knocked me out
yeah,
because I saw what a musical could do.
yeah,
It didn't have to be all love and roses.
yeah. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you: family, friends, clients, everyone, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your
Mhm.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Fair. I try to see everyone's side. It's not always possible, but I try, and I try to be helpful in, with what I can be helpful with. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. Yeah,
So in our
it's a hard
lives,
question.
yeah, it is. It's the therapy question. So in our
Yeah.
lives, we have these magical times where things just come together. Was there a
Mhm.
production that you were overseeing that did that, that just absolutely came together and it was like, wow, that was magical?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I There is a play. It's actually a trilogy that Alan Eichborn wrote. It's called The Norman Conquest, and it takes place in the same house, same weekend, same characters, different rooms in the house. So when a character is exiting one room in this play, in tomorrow's play, he's entering the other room
Yeah,
and the garden. And I directed that at the theater company, and that was magic.
yeah,
It just worked beautifully
yeah,
and tough to do.
yeah. I imagine so. So if anyone wants to tune into the Oval Table podcast, reach out, learn more about your wonderful work that you've done, your body of work, how can they do that?
Well, first of all, if they want to listen to the Oval Table, go to your favorite provider. It's out there. And then we love to hear from people. On email, just send it to the Alpha Dog Group.com.
Wonderful. Carl, this has
Alpha
been
Dogs Group. I'm sorry.
Alpha Dogs Group. I can even
Yeah,
put that in the notes to make sure that people have it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
put it out there. Carl, this has been delightful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your spark. Thank you for your story. Keep doing the wonderful work, man.
And you too, Joe. You
Yes.
do a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it.